Last week we spoke a little bit about the basics of the new vassals, the contributions, the deals that you'll have to make with your vassals in order to make them function properly within the cohabitation sphere that you can go ahead and set up. This week, however, we go a little bit deeper into how that all works, as well as one of the vassal types and their inner mechanics. Now, one thing that I find rather interesting is this new screen that has been shown. Essentially, it's a brand new agreement screen that is part of the context menu, and essentially it allows you to get a quick overview of the vassals that you have and what sort of deals you have with them, as well as their independent level. Now, right now, what you can see here is that you can have an overview of the type of holdings that you have, the contributions that this particular society gives to you, etc. What kind of expansion they can have, what kind of subject they are, what kind of wars they will go into with you. And overall, this all looks very, very good, and I'm really interested in how this is all going to pan out. Now, the specialist empires that are listed here are the Bulwark, which is essentially a setup that allows you to have a defensive scenario, most likely based around fleets and defensive operations, to really improve the performance of the hegemony. Then there is the Stellaris, which is very much focused on research and research specialization, but is not very strong in terms of military. And finally, there is the Prospectorium, which is all about resource acquisition, which is ironically also the one that we're going to be talking about today. Now, it's very interesting to see that the way that these empires function is that they have a tiered system. Very similar to how federations work. They've got XP. It really feels like they took the feature from federations and essentially bolted them on to this new vassal system. And the examples that we're going to be taking a look at today really reflect that. So the Prospectorium has levels, 3 of them exactly. And that is the same for all of the other ones, but in this particular case, it essentially works like this. You have a tier listing, and with every single tier, that vassal, in this particular case, the Prospectorium, is going to get a bonus. And that really refers to how much things cost or how much resources you are going to get. At tier 1, a Prospectorium will get a reduced cost in mining stations, as well as an increase in monthly energy, alloys, as well as strategic resources, and of course, finally, minerals, but at a massive deficit when it comes to scientific research. So they're really on the back foot when it comes to the science, but a strong foot ahead when it comes to any sort of resource generation. And this has a knock-on effect over time. As the Prospectorium levels up through its tiers, it will get better bonuses from 10 to 20 to up to 30% on their resources, which is an excessive amount of minerals, energy, alloys, strategic resources, etc., which is pretty darn crazy. But then, on the other hand, they will also no longer be able to science all that hard, at which at tier 3, they're looking at a minus 50% modifier when it comes to their specialization. What it basically translates to is that these type of empires, this type of subject, is an absolute powerhouse when it comes to resources. And if you've set up your vassal contract in the correct way, you will get a chunk of those resources every single month being siphoned back into the capital, or at least the hegemony lead in this particular case, which by itself really allows you to do some very interesting things. Because when I'm looking at this could be a very interesting scenario for co-op gameplay, especially in multiplayer, where a team of, say, 4 people try to conquer the galaxy or unify the galaxy in whatever way you would like, and essentially allow individual players to become hyper-specialized in their own thing, whether or not it be defense, whether or not it be science, or whether or not it be resource gathering. And all of those would then have knock-on effects, because you get the hegemon, or the lead empire, would get all of these resources from, say, the Prospectorium, keep a chunk of that, and then move the rest over to the other empires in terms of subsidies, etc. And it really works in a sort of I want to say, a symbiotic relationship, and it's fascinating to see how this is all going to balance out. Really, really cool to see that all of this. But still, as resources, as levels are being added to the Prospectorium in this particular case, there are chances for events to pop up. Every single year, there is a chance for getting new resources at level 1, energy and minerals. At level 2, there is special resources, and at level 3, there is things like Zro, dark matter, living metal, and that sort of thing. So you have a small chance of those popping up, and then you will need to send out a construction ship to do a special event, or at least the Prospectorium will need to do so, and then they can get all these additional resources, some of which will then be siphoned off immediately to the Hegemon, which will then deploy them to either their own infrastructure or subsidize one of the other empires in the group. So, for instance, I can see this Prospectorium, they are generating a ton of exotic gas. 40% of those are being moved back to the Hegemon, who then distributes that back to the science group, who can then upgrade their labs, etc. Again, it's a symbiotic relationship, and you gotta wonder whether or not some of these empires are going to go, do we really need a Hegemon? Can we just trade amongst each other in order to do this? Yeah, these are the questions you're going to need to ask, and of course there is always the chance of rebellion popping up here as well, so there is a bunch of things you need to keep in the back of your head. In addition to that, there is also things that you would see as well in the Federation type, where the Overlord gets a bonus. So in this particular case, the example that we have is here, the Overlord will get a bonus to reduced cost in mining stations or their build speed. I can already see that, for instance, the Scientorium would have a similar approach when it comes to building their science station, or in the Bulwark's case, a reduction in cost in ship upkeep or even build speed, etc. Not so much the total cost of a ship, because I feel that would be slightly overpowered. But those two examples of build speed and upkeep reduction would make a lot of sense. Rather than those costs, maybe even an increased supply cap on your fleets. So yeah, that's definitely something that is interesting here. In addition to that, at several tiers, you will get additional bonuses. So for instance, governors for a Prospectorium at level 2 and level 3 can get leaders that are just stronger. So governors getting the ability to generate more energy credits from jobs in their sector, similar to for like minerals and alloys. They can get an optimizer job, so essentially you can get an upkeep bonus there, or a refiner, which improves strategic resources or advanced resources, etc. So overall, it really does make a lot of sense to specialize your sectors, so to speak, so that you can optimize your things. So you have a bonus to minerals here, or you have a bonus to upkeep here, or you have a bonus to other resources over here, especially when it comes to the extractors and the special resources is something that you really want to keep in the back of your head. But yeah, special traits are also here, subject modifiers. If you've got governors, etc., leader levels being upgraded, traits can be traded with the Overlord, which is pretty darn awesome. So essentially, governors from the Overlord can get the Prospectorium traits as well to even boost their stuff even more. And finally, at one of the higher tiers, you can add the ability to do strip mining, which essentially removes all the agricultural stuff and replaces them with more mining districts. But in that scenario, you would probably want to subsidize more food to your Prospectorium. Otherwise, you're going to most likely run into problems here. But that's not all. That's not all we're going to be talking about today. We also have holdings. Now, holdings is one of the features where you can only have a limited amount of these special buildings on your subjects' worlds. And this works very similarly to the Megacorp building. They're even on the same tab. So the buildings that we have right now are the Overlord Garrison, which reduces crime on a planet, as well as adding additional loyalty, but lowers happiness. So that makes perfect sense. The Overlord Satellite Campus, where essentially consumer goods are being turned into research points to both the Overlord and the subject. So you have a way of generating generating even more science for your setup, even though the Overlord will get a much larger chunk of that. There's the recruitment office that increases naval capacity for the Overlord and also adds recruiter jobs, which is again a bit of a parasitic side of things because you can't not prioritize under prioritize those, unlike other jobs. Citizen service, the one that we just spoke about, is just really, really powerful in that sense. The experimental crater, which is only for the Calamitive's birth origin, essentially throws rocks at people, and you will get special areas that will generate a lot of minerals, but apparently they can miss. And yeah, it will take quite a lot of time to repair the planet, most likely due to damage. And it's not probably going to take all that much time, maybe like 24 months in order to fix that. The sacrificial shrine is part of the death cult civic. Essentially, it allows you to create mortal initiates on a planet, which you can then most likely sacrifice. Which is very, very nice. The distributed processing is for robots, where you can make mind thralls, and essentially it's a mind thrall. Essentially produces research. It does have a standard upkeep, but that is essentially it. Think like the Matrix, except instead of power, which they never should have used anyway, they generate science. The organic haven, which is for rogue servitors. If your Overlord is a rogue servitor, it essentially brings in the joys of bio trophies to your worlds as well. And that's just a limited overlook on some of the additional holdings that you can have. And once again, you cannot deprioritize these, so they are essentially parasitic on your worlds, and you will have to occupy those with jobs. But then we get to the origins. We have new origins, at least names, and we can do some speculation on what they actually do. Imperial Fiefdom, which is an Imperial Fiefdom. I am pretty sure that this will give you additional bonuses to being an empire, and on top of that, having a bunch of fiefs. It feels very much an Imperial setup together with the feudal economy or the feudal society in that sense. Think basically Dune, with all of these specialists being thrown into the mix. Teachers of the Shroud, it looks like we got ourselves a new Giro setup coming in our general direction. I hope the Whispers and the End of Cycle are not going to be too annoyed about that. Slingshot to the Stars, which is regarding the new megastructure apparently that you can build. I would not be surprised. Subterranean, a underground society. Who knows? We've already seen some of these in mods, which is rather cool. And finally, the Progenitor Hive, which most likely has something to do with a queen in your hive that needs to be protected at all costs. So another another origin based around hive minds, and it's about time. Hive minds do need a little bit of love. And apparently we're going to be seeing a lot of these throughout the weeks to see what actually happens with these and how they will all develop. Next week, apparently we're going to be taking a look at the new enclaves. Yes, there's 3 new ones, and we're going to be also talking about more holdings and even some ascension perks. So a good time to be had by all. If you have any ideas what these new origins are all about, or if you want to give some feedback about the new Prospectorium, or whether or not you're looking forward to play with your friends, say 3 or 4 of them, each of them with a specialization, playing as a fiefdom together with the Overlord, sounds like a lot of fun. Let's see whether or not that is going to happen or not. But yeah, if you're the kind of player that wants to do this, I think this would be a great time to get on board with Stellaris and play together with a bunch of friends and rule the stars with benevolence or an iron fist. I want to thank you so much for coming out today, and thank you so much for my patrons for making this video possible. Until next time, take good care of yourselves, and as always, it's good to be the Overlord.